When did growing older stop feeling like an achievement and start feeling like a disappearance? Aging is not just about wrinkles or slower bodies. It's about the quiet fear that you are slowly becoming invisible. You notice it in small ways at first. People interrupt you more easily. They ask for your opinion less often. They assume you've already lived your important chapters. You are still here, but the world no longer looks directly at you. There is a deep ache in realizing that you are needed less, consulted less, and relied on less. Not because you have nothing to give, but because society has quietly decided your season has passed. Being past your prime becomes a label, not a truth, yet it seeps into the mind all the same. And no one prepares us for this moment. No one prepares us for the day when life stops asking us to hurry, but we don't know how to slow down. You spent decades racing, building, providing, proving, enduring. Then suddenly the noise fades, the urgency disappears, and instead of relief, many feel confusion, even grief. Because when the chase ends, a frightening question appears. If I am no longer rushing towards something, who am I now? Zen Buddhism offers a radically different answer. It does not see aging as a loss. It sees it as a shift in purpose, not the end of usefulness, but the beginning of clarity, not fading, but refining, not shrinking, but distilling life down to what actually matters. In Zen, old age is not the season of doing less. It is the season of seeing clearly. And to age in peace, Zen teaches us this first, difficult truth. We must release something we have been gripping our whole lives. Lesson 1. Let go of who you used to be. Many people suffer in old age not because of failing bodies or passing time, but because they keep measuring today against yesterday. You look at your life now through the lens of who you used to be, who you were needed by, who depended on you, who you were when your role was clear and your value was constantly confirmed, and every comparison quietly hurts. You remember the job title that once defined you, the responsibilities that once gave you purpose, the strength, the speed, the certainty you once carried without effort. Now when those roles fade, something deeper aches, not the loss of ability, but the loss of identity. This is how loneliness begins, even when people are around. Zen Buddhism speaks gently but firmly to this pain. It says suffering is not caused by change itself. Suffering comes from clinging to what has already changed. There is an old Zen story about a man who came to a monastery carrying a heavy bundle on his back. When the master asked why he carried it everywhere, the man replied, "These are the achievements of my life. If I put them down, who will I be?" The master smiled and said, "Then you are not living. You are carrying. You cannot enter a new season while dragging an old self behind you. Letting go does not mean denying your past. It does not mean pretending your life before now didn't matter." Zen teaches something far more compassionate. Letting go means honoring what was and then setting it down. You bow to the life you lived. You thank the roles that shaped you. And then you release them, not in bitterness, but in gratitude. This is especially important as you grow older. Because when identity collapses, the heart often fills the space with self-doubt. If I am no longer useful in the way I was before, am I still valuable? Zen answers quietly, you were never valuable because of what you did. You were valuable because you were here. Aging invites you into a different kind of usefulness. Not the usefulness of production, but of presence. Not the usefulness of achievement, but of wisdom. Not the usefulness of doing, but of being. And there is deep healing in allowing that shift. When you stop forcing yourself to be who you were, something softens inside. The loneliness loosens its grip. The comparison fades. And for the first time in a long while, you may feel permission to rest. Not because you are finished, but because you are finally free. You are not losing yourself. You are being released from a version of yourself that no longer fits. And once you loosen your grip on who you were, Zen invites you to look carefully at who and what you still allow close to your heart. Lesson 2. Protect your peace, not your image. As the years pass, something quietly reveals itself. Aging doesn't just change your body, it exposes your relationships. You begin to notice who leaves you feeling calm and who leaves you feeling empty, who listens without needing to fix you, and who drains your spirit without ever meaning to. This clarity can be painful. For many years, you may have stayed connected out of obligation. You showed up because it was expected. You tolerated dismissive words, sharp tones, and emotional distance, not because it felt right, but because you feared what would happen if you let go. Loneliness felt more frightening than disrespect. Zen Buddhism names this suffering without judgment. It teaches that harmony is more valuable than approval. Peace is more valuable than being liked. There is an old Zen story of a monk who kept inviting loud, restless visitors into his hut. Each time they left, his space felt more chaotic. One day his teacher asked, "Why do you keep opening the door?" The monk replied, "Because I don't want to be alone." The teacher gently said, "But you are already alone, with your peace broken." Not all togetherness nourishes the heart. Zen does not teach withdrawal from the world. It teaches discernment. It teaches choosing a small, quiet circle over a large, exhausting one. A few steady presences instead of many shallow connections. As you grow older, you earn a sacred right, the right to choose who sits at your emotional table. You can love people from a distance. You can wish them well without allowing their chaos into your daily life. You can release the need to explain, defend, or justify your boundaries. This is not cruelty. This is compassion for yourself. Many people carry the belief that protecting their peace will make them selfish, but Zen asks a different question. What good can you offer the world if your inner life is constantly at war? There is deep healing in allowing relationships to become simpler, in choosing those who bring warmth instead of tension, those who see who you are now, not who you used to be or who they wish you would remain. And something beautiful happens when you begin to protect your peace. The noise around you softens, the expectations fall away, and the loneliness you feared often transforms into something else entirely. Solitude becomes spacious instead of empty, because when you stop performing for others, you finally meet yourself again. And that meeting, quiet, honest, and unforced, becomes a source of deep comfort. Zen reminds us that a calm heart is not built through popularity, but through presence, not through keeping everyone close, but through keeping yourself whole. And when your outer world grows quieter, something unexpected happens. Your inner world becomes louder. Lesson 3. Return from memory and worry to this moment. There is a particular kind of suffering that grows stronger with age, not because life becomes harder, but because the mind spends more time everywhere except where life is actually happening. Your body is here, but your heart keeps traveling. It travels backward into regret. Moments replayed again and again. Words you wish you had said differently. Paths you wonder about late at night. Regret becomes a place you visit so often that it starts to feel like home. And when the mind is not walking backward, it rushes forward, into fear-shaped futures, into questions with no answers, into worries about health, money, being alone, and being forgotten. This is how many people age, alive, yet never fully present. Zen Buddhism names this gently but clearly. The past is memory. The future is imagination. Only this moment is real. There is an old Zen story about a monk who was constantly distracted. When his teacher asked where his mind was, the monk replied, "Sometimes in the past, sometimes in the future." The teacher struck the ground lightly with his staff and said, "Then you are never where your life is." Zen does not ask you to stop thinking. It knows that would only create more struggle. Instead, Zen asks something far kinder. Come back to the body. When the mind spins, the body waits patiently. It breathes, it walks, it feels. Breathing is not just air moving in and out. It is life reminding you that you are still here. Walking is not just movement. It is the earth meeting you step by step. Sitting is not doing nothing. It is allowing yourself to exist without explanation, feeling the weight of your hands, the warmth of a cup, the quiet rise and fall of your chest, brings you back to the only place where peace can be found. Many older people believe they must figure things out to find peace, but Zen teaches the opposite. Peace is not found by fixing the past. Peace is not found by controlling the future. Peace is found by arriving fully where you already are. This is especially healing in later life, because when regrets soften and worries loosen, something unexpected appears. A quiet gratitude for still being here, a tenderness for the body that has carried you through every season, a sense that even now, especially now, life is still offering itself. Presence does not erase loneliness, but it transforms it. Loneliness becomes solitude. Solitude becomes spaciousness, and spaciousness becomes peace. Each time your mind drifts away, you do not scold it. You guide it back gently to the breath, the step, the sensation, again and again and again. This is not a weakness. This is wisdom ripened by time. But Zen also teaches something deeper still. Presence alone is not enough. We must also learn to make peace with what we cannot stop. But presence alone is not enough. Zen also teaches us to make peace with what we cannot stop. Lesson 4. Accept impermanence without bitterness. There is a moment in later life when change stops feeling abstract and starts feeling personal. Your body no longer responds the way it once did. Your abilities shift. The roles that once gave you direction quietly fall away. And in the silence that follows, a hidden fear rises. If everything changes, who am I? This question is not shallow. It is existential. It touches the deepest part of the heart. The fear of disappearing, of becoming irrelevant, of being left behind by life itself. Zen Buddhism does not rush to comfort this fear. It meets it with clarity. You are not the body that changes. You are not the role that fades. You are the awareness that witnesses the change. There is a Zen story of an old monk who was asked how he felt about aging. He pointed to a river and said, "The water's never the same, yet the river remains." His body changed, his strength changed, his days grew quieter. But the one who noticed all of it, the one who could still see, still feel, still love, remained untouched. Zen often speaks of life as seasons. Spring brings growth, summer brings activity, autumn brings release, and aging is winter, not decline, refinement, not emptiness, stillness, not death, depth. Winter strips life down to its essentials. There is less noise, less performance, less urgency to prove anything. And in that quiet, something rare becomes possible, seeing clearly without distraction. Much of the suffering around aging comes not from change itself, but from resistance to it. Resistance tightens the heart. Resistance hardens memory into bitterness. Resistance turns loss into identity. Zen teaches a softer way. Acceptance does not mean liking what changes. It means allowing reality to be real, without fighting it, without turning it into a personal failure. A Zen teacher once said, "When you stop arguing with impermanence, life stops arguing back." And in that surrender, space appears. Space to grieve what is gone. Space to honor what remains. Space to rest without shame. This is especially healing in later life, because when the chase ends and resistance loosens, loneliness begins to soften too. You realize you are not alone in change. Everything that lives is changing with you. Acceptance creates spaciousness, and in spaciousness, peace finally has room to enter. You are not losing yourself. You are being invited to know yourself beyond form, beyond role, beyond time. And when resistance falls away, Zen shows us something surprising. That meaning has nothing to do with achievement. Lesson 5. Find meaning in simple joy and gratitude. There is a question that often arrives quietly in later life, usually at night, when the world is still. Did I do enough? Did my life really matter? It is not a dramatic question, it is a tired one. A question born not from ambition, but from looking back and wondering if the effort was worth it. Many elders carry this feeling of being unfinished, not because they failed, but because modern life taught them to measure meaning by milestones, titles, and outcomes. And when the milestones are behind you, the mind begins to doubt. Zen Buddhism offers a gentle but radical correction. Meaning, it says, is not something you build. Meaning is something you notice. There is a Zen story of an old monk who was asked what he had accomplished in his life. He replied, "I watch the seasons change without turning away." The student was confused. The monk smiled and said, "That was enough." Zen does not deny effort, but it refuses to let effort be the measure of worth. Happiness does not live in extraordinary moments. It lives in ordinary moments, fully received. A warm cup held in quiet hands, the sound of rain against a window, a familiar room that still feels like home, a conversation where you are truly seen. These moments were always there, but youth often rushes past them. Later life brings a different gift, the ability to notice what was once invisible. Zen teaches a simple practice. Each day, acknowledge what still is, not what is missing, not what has faded, but what quietly remains. Gratitude shifts the mind from scarcity to sufficiency. Instead of asking, "What did I lose?" you begin to ask, "What is still here?" And something remarkable happens. Regret loosens. The heart softens. Joy returns, not as excitement, but as contentment. This joy is not loud. It does not demand attention. It settles into you like a deep exhale. For many elders who feel alone, this practice becomes a form of natural healing. You may not have the crowds you once did. You may not have the roles you once carried, but you still can feel, and that is no small thing. Zen reminds us, a meaningful life does not do everything, but one that noticed something. When you stop measuring life by what you achieved and begin honoring how deeply you lived, a quiet peace emerges. You realize that meaning was never missing. It was simply waiting for you to slow down enough to see it. And finally, Zen asks one last question. Not about what you achieved, but about what you leave behind. At some point in life, a quiet truth begins to rise above all the noise. Your legacy was never meant to be your success. Zen Buddhism teaches something far more enduring. Your real legacy is how safe others felt around you, how calm the room became when you entered, how gently people could breathe in your presence, how seen, respected, and unjudged they felt, even without words. This is not a legacy measured in awards or accomplishments. It is measured in nervous systems that softened near you, in hearts that felt less alone because you were there. And compassion lies at the center of this truth. Compassion for others, yes, but also compassion for yourself, especially for the version of you that did its best with what it knew at the time, the version that made mistakes before it had wisdom, the version that carried burdens it never asked for, the version that survived when it could not yet heal. Zen reminds us that aging is not the end of your relevance. It is the deepening of your presence. You no longer need to perform. You no longer need to prove. You no longer need to rush toward becoming someone else. To age in peace is not to fade away. It is to finally live without fear. If these words touch something in you, let that connection continue. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need a gentler way to see their own life. And if you feel ready, leave a comment below. What kind of presence do you want to leave behind? Your reflection may be exactly what someone else has been waiting to hear.